the 16th left, the 4th Boston came behind him.
Yeah.
Hey, welcome to Ecologic for the month of, what are we, July. Uh, Beautiful time of the year. We've had cool weather for the last couple of weeks, thanks to the rain. Our subject tonight is Fort Butte La Rose, Fort Burton, which was lost for a long, long time till some timber company cut a lot of timber that belonged to the state. And we were trying to do our best to nail them. And went to the state land office for the maps of the area, and we found the original General Taylor engineering drawings of Fort Butte La Rose. And it was built with the Indian mound that gave Butte La Rose its name. That Indian mound was right on the Atchafalaya River, and they tore down that mound to build the fort. And it's what they call a breastworks fort. It was a levee, a triangular levee with the one long side parallel to the river, where they had 3 cannons, and it guarded a junction of the river where the Grand River and the Atchafalaya came together. And to get a boat into the Red River up to Shreveport, you had to get by that point. So it was a very critical part. The current there was often very strong. So the boats of that day only went 6 or 7 miles an hour, and the current was running around 4 or 5, which made a real easy shot for the 3 big cannons that were sitting there, operated by a group of young cadets, a Crescent unit out of New Orleans. So anyway, Brad has done a bunch of work on that, and Mr. Nicko is here also as my guest, who have been researching this for the last 10 or 12 years or more, since I guess in the '09 or so was when we actually was discovered. There were newspaper articles written about it. So people of the area got very interested and involved, and a prominent unit that was first occupied, the Union unit, was the 16th New Hampshire Regiment, and many of those guys lost their lives. None of them went to bullets. They lost their lives, mostly to malaria and yellow fever and smallpox, I think. So anyway, tell us about your interest in it, Brad.
Well, I've had a camp down the Atchafalaya River since 2010, and I've always just had a general interest in the area. In 2015, I moved to the Butte La Rose area. I lived on Hermadoo for a while, and I got married, and my wife and I bought a lot on the river itself, not far from the fort. Recently, a real good friend of mine, Adam Fisher, got together with Adam, and we purchased the land that is right across the river from where the fort would have been located, and just spend probably more time than I should looking at the history and researching, and it's an interesting time of life. It was an interesting battle, and it's got a lot of history in the area.
So Blake, the old fort was seen to, I think, 3 graveyards, and the old maps show that. One was the graveyard for the community of Butte La Rose, which was across the river from the current Butte La Rose. And then the 1918 flu epidemic, there was a bunch of burials in the fort, about 40 or 50 people from Henderson, from Pelba, several other communities nearby there, probably Fort Butte La Rose itself. And then away from the fort was the military cemetery, and it is shown on the maps. And then you have, down by La Rose, you have an Indian mound that's still there today, and that was a burial site.
Yeah, so they have, down Bayou La Rose is 16 SM1 and 16 SM2 are 2 pretty well documented Indian mounds that we were just looking at, Mr. Harrell. And as far as the graveyards go, like you said, there were a couple there. One was for the soldiers, and then one was used by, I believe, the people from the village of Atchafalaya, from the flu epidemic,
right.
right. And then I was telling you about the
Atchafalaya was where the old bridge was,
Sure, yep.
yeah, which was
It's-
taken down by the 1927 flood.
Yeah, if you're in Henderson, you're riding around, you see the old wooden posts that run through Pelba and all that. That was the old railroad tracks that led you to Atchafalaya. So, and it went across the river.
And it was a big fishing village. They would catch catfish on the river. They'd get it to Atchafalaya, and they'd put it on a train to Baton Rouge and whatever.
Yep.
I'm sure they never ran bootleg whiskey through there either.
They had a lot of stuff going on back then, I have a feeling. But I was saying earlier, before we got on the show, that the people I bought the property from were some Benoits that were on that point right across from the fort in the very early 1900s, and they approached Dr. Martin, who owned the property that the fort sits on, and they went to Dr. Martin as the Butte La Rose Cemetery Association, and they asked Dr. Martin for a donation of 2 acres of land to bury their dead. And I actually went on the Clerk Corps website, and I found the active donation from Dr. Martin. It's handwritten. Very interesting stuff. A good friend of mine named Miss Judy gave me a list recently of 7 or 8 people that were actually buried there, in addition to all the, good Lord, how many people buried from the fort and then from the 1918 epidemic that aren't documented.
And I wonder if they list some of the deaths. They list all the deaths. The regiment had about 915 people, and about 220 died. Some of them died at Butte La Rose, and I wonder if they were buried there or if they were moved to Brescia City or whatever. That's not clear in the record. I have a feeling that some were buried at Butte La Rose.
From the fort, you saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
from the fort, yeah.
Yeah.
'Cause it's listed as military cemetery on the old maps.
I found, let's see, was it in? Oh, you brought the article today, Mr. Harold. Let's
Yeah.
see what it's entitled. The National Museum of Civil War Medicine. They're talking about it, what the conditions of the fort were like after the battle. You said it earlier: mosquitoes, malaria, snakes, and the write-up here.
Bear, cougar,
Alligators.
yeah.
They said the write-up says Union soldiers became sick and died almost daily. Funerals were a regular occurrence. Pine board tombstones inscribed with lead pencil markings soon dotted the landscape around Butte La Rose. So, yeah, guys.
So they were definitely buried there.
Yeah, no doubt.
And when I found the cemetery, and this is what it looked like. It looked like mass graves.
Really.
It wasn't individual graves. There were about 4 grave sites that were about 15 feet long, 7, 8 feet wide, and about 2-3 feet above grade. And they were they were not lined up as you'd think a military entity would be. They looked like they were built around the existing trees.
Huh.
And they did timbering in the area, and the timber road went right through that gravesite.
Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
So, this is about the 1862, 1863 area.
Yeah, it was April of 1862.
63 was the battle.
The battle.
Yeah.
1863. The day before they came through, 5 Union gunboats were coming up the Atchafalaya, and there was the Queen of the West was a big gunboat that the Confederates had, and they were at the mouth of Five Pigeon on Grand Lake. And from 3 miles, one of those Union boats shot 3 miles, 1 shot, and hit the Queen of the West. They hit the powder keg and blew up the whole thing, killed 27 Confederates. Kind of interesting, the captain of that vessel had been a U.S. representative for 3 terms.
Wow.
I'll be doing.
Yeah, and so that cleared the path for them to come on up, and they were very anxious to take control of the Atchafalaya because their target was the capital of capital of Louisiana had moved to Shreveport.
Yes,
And they wanted to go up the Red River to capture Shreveport.
right.
For the
Which
Texas,
happened in 1864.
to
And
capture Texas.
yeah, they wanted to go through Shreveport the first time. 1864, the battle at Mansfield and the battle at Pleasant Hill, which was an enormous slaughter. The Union lost that, and thousands of lives were lost in that.
So do you,
But the key, they needed logistical support with supply vessels,
Yes,
and they had to get passed by Butte La Rose.
that's what
And-
that's what Atchafalaya was.
That's right, because they could go from the Grand Lake, either up the Atchafalaya or up the Grand River, but they could, both of those rivers converged. The three rivers, the Little Atchafalaya, the Grand, converged right at Butte La Rose.
Yes,
And so that was a critical point for a path north towards Shreveport.
and I always found that it was interesting how they put the fort where you could see both ways down the river. It was
Yeah.
at a junction, right?
Absolutely.
It
Yeah.
was a good defensive move, I guess.
Yeah.
So 1861, the Union takes New Orleans, and the other big part of the war is control of the lower Mississippi River, and the Port Hudson, Baton Rouge area is kind of the next big
I think
step.
it was 1862.
62, I apologize, was New Orleans. Sorry, thank you for correcting me. So then Port Hudson's kind of the next step, and
Yeah, Port Hudson and Vicksburg going on at the same time.
yes, so.
And a prominent Lafayette citizen, General Gardner, was the commanding officer at Port Hudson.
Yes. So Banks orders two people. Two of his general was Emory, who's kind of around the Plaquemine area, and then General Wetzel, who's down by the Brashear City, Morgan City area. He tells them to converge upon Butte La Rose. And he wants to clear out Butte La Rose so that he can open up supply for the Union soldiers, but also to get under the line of attack on Port Hudson. That was his next move, right? New
Yeah.
Orleans is out of the way. Next is Port Hudson to kind of take over the lower part of the Mississippi. So Butte La Rose, that's how Butte La Rose becomes a target. So Emory starts down Plaquemine. Man, he runs his boat aground. He tries to march some guys down to Butte La Rose. I think they marched like 9 miles in knee-deep mud, and they turned back around, and then they had this big log jam they couldn't get through. So Emory wasn't successful, but General Wetzel was where he launched all his boats out of Brashear City and Morgan City, and that's the Clifton, Arizona, Calhoun, and Estrella that attacked the fort. So that's kind of how it started off.
There are 5 vessels, and there was 2 vessels defending it, and they both cut and run. They exchanged gunfire, and they both left, and both captains were court-martialed,
Yeah, they were.
but neither were found guilty.
And if you read
On the Confederate side?
Yeah.
right, and well, if you read the write up on the 16th New Hampshire, so again in 1862, New Orleans gets taken by the Union, right? A lot of these guys that were living in New Orleans, prominent people, got out of there. So in the write up for the New Hampshire regiment, it said that it was noted young business and professional men from New Orleans, quote unquote, the flower of the city, was said to be on the transport boat that took off after the fort. You know, as the Union boats are approaching and firing on the fort, 2 boats take off. And like you said, they court-martialed. I think they ended up court-martialing the guys on those boats, but they found them not guilty.
Right.
They were trying to get some big names out of there, I think.
One was Admiral Benbow. He was from Mobile and very prominent in Mobile history.
Who's that?
Admiral Benbow.
Benbow. Okay.
Benbow, yeah.
And when New Orleans fell, the Confederates troops were sent by rail to Camp Moore.
Okay. I mean, I would imagine if you were loyal to the Confederacy, you were getting out of New Orleans.
Yeah.
Another interesting kind of fact on Fort Butte La Rose is, and Harold mentioned it was mosquitoes and snakes, but the 16th New Hampshire said that they found the barracks there were the best they had seen since they had enlisted. So it's odd that you have these kind of high-ranking New Orleans people that got shipped to this fort in the middle of the swamp that are staying in nice barracks, and as soon as the fight starts, man, they're on a transport boat out of here.
I think the barracks slept 70 people, and they had an officer's quarters, and they had a mess hall.
Yeah.
3 buildings there. Yeah.
I don't think the rich people in New Orleans were sleeping in the swamp water, huh?
They weren't in tents.
No.
I wonder how many shots was fired, from the fort against us.
None.
Not
None.
one shot.
No, they didn't fire. One shot.
shot?
One shot, it hit the ship.
And it did.
Yeah,
hit
it hit the Clifton. So
It hit what?
It hit the front of one of the ships coming in. It
The
said
Clifton?
It broke something on the front of the ship.
I mean, the write-up says they had a pretty good exchange, man.
I
So
thought it was more than one shot, but that's.
the boats are coming up from Morgan City, and it says the Arizona's in the lead, and then the Arizona steps back and lets the Clifton get ahead as they approach, because the Clifton's got the bigger guns. The Clifton starts shooting at the Confederate boats, the Anna and the Mary T, and the Arizona takes the fort.
Yeah.
They start shooting at the fort, all right, on one side. So, as I mentioned earlier, a friend of mine bought the land opposite of the fort. Man, what I read is the sharpshooters, the guerrillas, the swamp devils they call them, that were hidden in the trees, almost caused them more problem than the cannon fire from the fort. So they shot shell, grape, and spherical case. Both of the Arizona and the Clifton did on the opposite side into the woods. And like we had said, the New Hampshire regiment documents a cannonball hitting the Clifton and damaging the Clifton pretty bad. But the Confederates weren't able to load their cannons fast enough. And man, I think it was a short battle. It was like 30 minutes, according to one of the letters I wrote. And the Union boats got up on the fort pretty quickly, and the white flag came up. But the Anna and the Mary T for the Confederates
You think they had the current in their advantage?
They would have been going up the current, I
They
think.
were going up the current.
Up the current, yeah.
And it was high water. It was April,
Yeah.
so it was high water. So they were not going very fast for sure.
No. Well, one other thing that I read on the write-up, and I don't want to talk too much, but as the Union boats are coming up to the fort, again, they're getting all these sharpshooters even further down, where what did you say, the Kinsman got hit earlier?
Yeah.
Was it the Kinsman?
Queen of the West.
Queen of the West.
Yeah.
The Queen of the
Queen
West
of the
got
West.
hit. So I mean, and that was really not too
The day
close from the
before.
fort.
That was the day before.
Yeah. So they had people all in the area shooting at them from the
And
bushes.
one of the write-ups I read, they would hire local guys to get through the basin, and they would often run aground.
Yeah. So, well, they picked up, the write-up says they picked up one of these guys. They picked up 2 of them. And one of them claimed to be a unionist, is how it's written. And he's in raggedy clothing, and he is swearing up and down, I'm for the Union, but I know the area well. So they questioned him a lot, according to the write-up, but they let him go up in the pilot house, the wheelhouse, because he knew the area. And after the battle happens, the Arizona and the Clifton take off after the 2 Confederate gunboats, and then the Estrella and the what's the other one here, and the Calhoun sort of take the fort and secure the fort, while the Arizona and the Clifton chase after the 2 boats. So the guy that they picked up, the Confederate boats are moving quite a bit quicker than the Confederate boats, and they can see the smoke, but they can't catch up with them. And then the Atchafalaya splits off at Bayou, Alabama.
Yes.
Okay, so from the way that it's written, the right to go to Bayou, Alabama looks like the main channel, man.
That's
It
right.
looks like that would be the way to go.
Yeah.
But left is actually like the long, skinny Atchafalaya route. The Confederates take the left, and the guy in the wheelhouse says, make a right. You know, and they do, and they get stuck
Yeah.
in a very shallow
Yeah.
place, and they have to
Yeah.
turn around. They
My
lose.
Alabama-
They lose the
Yeah.
Confederate boats.
It quickly
I
gets
remember
smaller and
reading that
smaller.
somewhere.
Yeah. So I thought that was interesting. And the way, again, it was written up was that this guy almost kind of wanted to get caught so that he could potentially,
Yeah.
lead them the wrong way.
The soldiers in the woods, they were pickets.
Okay.
You know, they were the first line of defense.
Yeah.
You know, if
They
you
were,
heard,
they
if
were
they heard,
snipers.
Snipers. Yeah.
yeah. But like, they're also pickets. You know, that if somebody heard, if you heard them shoot, you knew somebody was coming. You know.
Now, one of the jumping off points for the basin was Catahoula.
Okay.
And they had a road from Catahoula to the fort. The old map said real bad road.
Yeah. You told me that, and I saw that map a few days later, Mr. Harrell.
You did.
It did say that. Yeah.
Yeah, real bad road.
Yeah, it did say that. That
Because
was.
when they built the levees, that was all over with, so.
Yeah. What
But
else?
for years, I would ask people, nobody knew where that fort was,
Yeah.
And I asked people that grew up there, lived there, where's Fort Butte? Always washed into the river, And then
Didn't you fly
a named timber company. You see the old maps, when you look at the map and it shows all the waterways around the fort, that filled in when they built the levees,
Mhm.
It filled in enough where they could build a road, from the levee to Butte La Rose, which meant you had to move the town from across the other side. The old store was originally on the other side.
Yeah.
And they moved it, that store's still there today.
Yep.
But as that filled in, it still belonged to the state.
Yep.
And, all that area along that road, that's all state property.
Yeah.
Now, the state gave it away. They literally gave it away. I think one of the companies had 300-something lots, and the state land officer had put notice on the doors, your camp is on state lands, and call us for a lease.
Huh.
And the person in charge of the basin program made a deal with the claimants and created some worthless property for all those income producing lots.
Yeah.
And when they got it, they forced people to buy it. They said, you either buy it or we're gonna sell it to somewhere else. And somebody had a camp on it,
Yeah, you can see in some of the old maps they had some camps and establishments, even in some of the old pictures that were drawn. They had houses on both sides of the river.
Yeah. When they built the inside guard levee, they built it from the bottom up, and the flood of '54, all that water came with high levels of sediment, and it really filled in all those bottoms.
Yeah.
Where they put the Butte La Rose high, the road, from the levee to the road. That's all recent deposition.
Yeah, it is. So you're saying when they put the road across Bayou La Rose, huh?
No.
I'm sorry.
See, there was a big opening from Henderson into the river right at Butte La Rose.
I always say
And-
Bayou La Rose.
and
Butte La
below-
Rose Bay.
Butte La Rose Bay.
Butte La Rose Bay.
Butte La Rose Bay.
Yeah.
And below that was Bayou La Rose,
Yeah.
which headed west kind of. But they built the levee across Butte La Rose Bay.
Yeah. And that's what
And
caused the
so
sediment.
when the flood of '54, they were building the levee from the bottom up, so all the flood water came into it from the top, had no place to go.
Yeah.
And that filled in the whole area.
Yeah.
Interesting part about history, huh? The basin has changed so much,
It has.
But it had to be a tough place to be stationed.
Yeah, I'd found a couple of things about that. So right when the Estrella comes up, the two boats that secured the fort, we were laughing about this week, Mr. Harrell. So one of the officers for the Confederacy steps off and says, "You are doubtless glad to get here, but you will be gladder when you leave." And then the next write-up on the New Hampshire write-up says, "No prophet of early or late times has ever offered a truer prediction."
So, and look, the war of medicine thing here has a couple of comments from some of the guys that were posted there in the months or the weeks afterwards. I think they were only there for like 6 weeks. One of the Confederate prisoners said he was actually, quote unquote, damn glad to be captured. He said that said, they were in the swamps as long as they desired to, and thought when we had been there a few months, we would be glad to surrender also. Another description was, it was a grand rendezvous of mosquitoes, fleas, wood ticks, lice, lizards, frogs, snakes, alligators, fever bacteria, dysentery microbes, and every conceivable type of malaria poison.
Yeah, malaria, yellow fever.
Yeah.
And, you know, I had communication with the 16th, regiment historian in New Hampshire. And there was a guy in charge of military history for the state of New Hampshire. And one of the things he proposed was to have a memorial sign being placed there.
Okay.
And the names of the people who passed away in that regiment. You know.
I know they have one at the boat launch. It's not much, but they do give a little bit of history of the fort. It could use some improvement.
I wonder where the guns went for the fort. The big,
Good question.
They had, 3D.
3 big guns, yeah.
I would imagine the Union didn't leave them behind.
They,
Oh, no.
They took them with them someplace.
they might have
They-
used them against Port
They
Hudson.
might have
I
dumped, they
bet you.
might have dumped them. No,
No?
I don't believe.
You think they
Those
jumped
big
them
guns
in
were
the,
hard to move. They're
Yeah.
really hard. Vicksburg's going on at the same time. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
You know, Vicksburg, the Yazoo River comes in, and Eads, who built the gunboats, of fame, he got the Southwest Pass open.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
all
He
that.
put the.
And he built the Eads Bridge at
Didn't
St.
he make
Louis.
some big mats he sunk in the river that kind of opened up
That's
the
right.
pass?
They took willow logs
Yeah.
and they took a 3,000-foot channel and they reduced it to about 500 feet.
Yeah.
And it scoured the channel, the first flood, it scoured the channel, and it was only like 15 feet of water.
Yeah.
And it scoured to over 30 feet in one flood event. Ships would have to wait for high water, they'd have to wait for high tides to be able to come to New Orleans
Yeah.
until that was done.
And he built some of the gunboats, you
He
think?
built 6 of them
Wow.
in 6 months.
Wow.
And one of them was the first one that's at Vicksburg. It's at the Vicksburg Museum. It was the first military vessel that was sunk with a mine. And the Confederates had designed mines on the Yazoo River. That boat had gone way up the Yazoo and it was coming back. And they filled dynamite in canisters about 3 or 4 feet underwater, and they stretched them across. And as the Yazoo, as this vessel came, they ignited the mines with a plunger with dynamite plunger,
Wow.
and sunk that boat.
Well, you were talking earlier about grenades with some.
Well, that was at Port Hudson,
Yeah,
the
Port
first use
Hudson.
of grenades.
Really? I never heard
The
that.
fuses were
Union
too
would
long.
throw 'em over, and
The
Confederates
fuses
would
were
throw
too
'em back.
long. They'd light them with a match, and the Confederates quickly learned they'd throw them back. But the Battle of June 29th, the Union had 4,800 casualties.
Wow.
And then the 1st of July, they had right at 4,000 casualties
At Port Hudson.
at Port Hudson.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was and then Vicksburg fell July 4th, and then Grant sent shiploads of troops to go capture Port Hudson.
Yeah, that
And
was the
General,
7th.
and General Gardner, I think it was July,
I think the 9th
Fifth
was the
is-
actual surrender.
yeah,
Yeah.
Gardner surrendered.
So,
And Gardner's prominent in Lafayette.
yeah.
Yeah.
You were saying he's buried behind the
There,
cathedral?
if you walk out the back door of the cathedral, you'd walk into his grave.
Right.
He got the first parking spot, huh, man?
Yeah.
He married General Mouton's sister. He was from New York, and but he married General Mouton's sister. But he was a commanding officer on the army units that captured Mexico City.
Really?
And we don't much brag about that, you know.
No.
We invaded Mexico with the Marine Corps and the Army. Gardner commanded the troops with the, Grant worked for him.
Yeah.
Grant was a supply officer.
Wow.
He was a supply officer in the War of 1848, the Mexican War. And once they took over Mexico, they took Arizona, California, New Mexico, Utah, all the way up Oregon. All of that was under Spanish control, Mexican control, and they took it all.
I wanted to ask you, Mr. Harrell, I've heard that there's a gunboat that sunk near the fort, and I didn't read anything where it was sunk in the battle. Again, I bring
It
up,
was sunk,
To block a channel, wasn't it?
no,
I heard it ran aground. It was a supply boat that ran aground.
it was, used to be able to see it at low water.
That's what I heard too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
I don't see it
when
anymore.
We were kids, we could see it.
You used to see it?
Yeah, yeah.
Come on.
Oh, yeah, oh, yeah, oh, yeah. It was
That's good.
right at the corner of Butte La Rose, right where the Butte La Rose turns. It was on that corner, close to the landing.
Okay.
It was on that corner.
Bayou La
It's up
Rose.
on Butte La Rose.
Okay.
On Butte La Rose, on that corner. Oh, you could see it when the water was low.
Yeah.
Now it's probably all washed away.
I remember Ray Pellerin telling me he could see it when he was younger too. And I've looked quite a bit. I don't see it. It's probably gone now. Huh?
Probably parts of it remain, you know, I mean, you have to look
Probably
for
see it on sonar,
Yeah.
And there's,
the fish finder.
I fished down in the basin down towards American Pass, and the 21-inch canal comes into the river. You know, I guess it would be right west 6 Mile Lake, and the river split down from there about 3 or 4 miles. And there's remnants that look like, you know, boards that are like 6 by 12s.
Really?
And they're very long boards, and they're kind of in the dirt. And I think that could be the remnants of the Queen of the West.
Wow.
Because it's not any kind of oil field stuff. It's got some interesting connections. It has long bolts that are like maybe 20 inches long, and they're an inch, and they have one side is a screw-on bolt, but the other is a head that's about 3 or 4 inches. Now, that's not anything we use in oil field construction that I'm
No.
aware of.
No.
And we didn't use planks that were 6 feet in thickness. That's something you use on a gunboat.
Yeah. It looks different, huh?
Yeah, but I would just often wonder if that is the remnant of the Queen of the West. Because it was shot right at the mouth of Bay Pigeon, and there was a north wind blowing. And that would have taken it right, it was burning, but it was floating and drifting
Yeah.
with this north wind blowing.
So,
Maybe
Go ahead.
would it show on the map of the fort where that ship went down?
I don't think so.
no, not the Queen of the West, but
No,
the one that you saw in the water.
Right, yeah.
Was,
No, that show.
Where was that at on the map?
So I don't know if I'm catching it on the screen, but it would have been right at the corner of.
That right at the corner. You see Butte La Rose? It
Yeah.
would have been right on that corner, right across from the fort,
Okay.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
right down from the landing.
Oh.
It was sunk to slow the Union down, wasn't it?
Now, I understand the 4th Boston took over when these guys left,
Okay.
in the 60s.
See, I didn't know that. You'd mentioned that
Yeah,
today.
4th Boston, and I don't see a lot of, and they stayed there for a long time, till the end of the war.
Okay.
And then I think when they left in 1866, well after the war was over, I think they burned everything, the barracks and everything else, I think.
Yeah.
But there was a museum in Franklin that had fantastic records of all that.
You told me that. I looked it up. It was a private collection.
Private thing.
It's
yeah.
not Grevenberg, because Grevenberg is
No,
in Franklin.
No,
Uh,
I have pictures of.
I forgot what it was called. And I have a picture of it on my phone anyway.
Yeah, I have a picture on my phone. But
I want to call down there. You said they had some pretty good records.
They know where a bunch of these vessels were sunk.
Yeah.
And I think they know where the Queen of the West was sunk. I have an idea. And then it got covered over by, when they dredged the channel across Grand Lake, that vessel probably ended up on a sandbar. And they dredged and probably covered it, you know.
Yeah.
But then they dredged a canal through the site, and that was on the edge of that canal, a pipeline canal.
Yeah, the current was a big factor back then. I remember reading
When you look at, the Red River didn't have dams back in those days, and the Red River starts in New Mexico. It's an enormous watershed.
Really?
Many rivers come into it, yeah. And then the Mississippi also came into it. And the Mississippi was, from where the rivers divide, that history goes back to Captain Shreve. There's a 28-mile oxbow. And that oxbow returned to itself, and the separation was only 100 yards. And on the top end of that oxbow, the Red River came in. And on the bottom, the Atchafalaya was a branch of the Mississippi.
Yeah.
And so Captain Shreve, he had one of the most powerful steamboats on the river. And he took a giant plow and hooked it up the ropes and made, during low water, that trench about 100 yards, only about 8 or 10 feet deep, with this giant plow that they designed just for that.
Mm.
And then when the river came up, it didn't get high enough in 1854. But in 1855, it got high enough to go through the ditch that Shreve had put there.
And he cut it short.
And it cut off 28 miles. But it was a real problem for him because he had started Shreveport.
Mm.
And that was up the Red River, and from the Red River to the Mississippi, it logged in. Giant log jam that took 50 or 60 years to clear.
Yeah.
And then the bottom end sanded over. So you couldn't get a boat from the Mississippi into the Red River to Shreveport. That's why Butte La Rose was so important.
Yeah.
They wanted to have supply boats accompany the army that they planned to invade. They wanted to go in 1863, but Vicksburg and Port Hudson diverted them. I mean, they came through Lafayette in March of 1863.
Yeah.
And they got to about Opelousas and they got turned around to go back to Port Hudson or whatever, or Vicksburg. So 1864 was a big move up. And that's why capturing Butte La Rose in 1863 was critical.
Was a big
It was
move.
a big thing.
Yeah.
They couldn't bring logistic support to the unit, and they were sending 50 or 60,000 troops that had to eat, needed ammunition, and go down the list. So it's,
I wonder how far west you could have gone from where the fort's at, jumping by you in Butte La Rose Bay. How far west can you go?
well, Bayou La Rose went into Bayou Ami, into the Forks, and into Lake Fosse Point, Lake Dauterive.
Yeah.
Lake Fosse Point went into the Grand, way down,
Yeah.
and so that all connected. There was no levees,
You're right.
But Bayou La Rose, you could have gone from Bayou La Rose into Bayou Ami at Catahoula. And then the Forks would have taken you into Lake Dauterive, into Lake Fosse Point, into Lake Ronde. All those lakes were connected.
So the Atchafalaya hit the Mississippi. So it was where it hit the Mississippi, Port Hudson, and then the Red River above it. I was kind of looking at that today, but I didn't quite get there.
Port Hudson is just above Baton Rouge.
Yeah. I was looking at why it was.
But because, of course, Port Hudson was critical, a lot of the river is multiple channels.
Yeah, it changed,
It
the
changes
course of the river
constantly.
changed.
But in many parts of the river, you have multiple channels. So they put the forts where there was a single channel. And Port Hudson was one of those. So was Vicksburg. And then they had another fort at what they call Shreveport. There's a fort on the river above, right
Fort
at
Delucy.
Angola. Right, it's in Mississippi, right above the line. And so where the river was individual, were critical points of defense, that's where they wanted to put forts, because boats coming up the river were moving very slow.
Yeah.
It was a real easy target. And
Yeah.
that's where
It was
Butte La
Fort
Rose.
Delucy or something. It starts with a D, correct? The other fort you were trying to, Delucy or the other fort?
There was a fort, I know Jeremiah Supple owns he owns the land now, and he owns the whole fort. There's not much of it left. But it's on a high bluff on the Mississippi, right above Angola.
Yeah.
And as you see, when they made that cut, they formed an island, and it's called Shreveport, and it's still there today.
Really.
Yeah, Shreveport. And we camp on it, and it's kind of, the island, the Mississippi is changing so much. There were two channels, one on the Angola side and one on the other side. So with Shreveport is a big island right in the middle. And the island on the east side near Angola was about 30 feet deep. And the channel on the west side was about 70 feet deep. And now the channel on the east side, on the Angola side, is only about 3 or 4 feet deep. Tugs and barges can't go up in anymore.
No.
So the river's changing a lot, and that's a big problem for the Corps of Engineers.
Yeah, I had a guy from the Corps of Engineers told me the river takes and the river gives and the river takes away. He told me.
Oh, yes, it does.
So.
Yeah, they all up and down the river, they have these concrete mats to keep it from washing away.
Yeah.
The wife and I, about 6 years ago, went up to St. Louis and came all the way back to Butte La Rose.
I remember you telling me that. Not on a big cruise ship either,
That
huh?
was 16-foot flat. 16-foot flat with 40. And David, who's handling the cameras and everything, was our escort. He drove the truck and would,
This is the Coureur de Bois, huh?
he'd keep us supplied with fuel.
It's time to get out the river. It's time to get out the river, Harold.
You couldn't buy gasoline on the river, so you had to. And David Falls, we'd find a landing and then take out, and then we'd go to the interstate and get gas and go to a motel.
Yeah.
It was a 4-day trip. It was a fun trip.
4 days?
Yeah, 4 days. 900 miles.
Wow.
The river's running about 3 miles an hour, and the little boat would cruise at about 27, so netting 30 miles an hour most of the time.
From where to where now?
St. Louis.
St. Louis all the way down
all the way to Butte La Rose.
Butte La Rose?
Yeah.
You took out of Butte La Rose?
Took out at Butte La
Cool,
Rose.
dude.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, quite a trip.
So.
How long did it take you?
4 days.
4 days, yeah.
Yeah, 4 days. We were running about 10 or 12 hours a day.
I'm gonna show my
And
ignorance
where
on
would you
this.
sleep whenever you?
At a motel.
Okay.
Is there a lot? You have to go through the locks?
Yeah,
Really?
Old River Locks, yeah.
In Simsport?
Well, it's right near Simsburg.
Yeah.
It's the Old River Locks, and there's about a 20-foot difference.
So they locked you through, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And they have tie-ons that go up and down with the water. So you can tie on it as floats. They have floats that are kind of like barrels in a circle like, and you tie onto it and it goes up with you or down with you.
I've locked through on Bayou Teche one time. That was interesting to see how that works.
Oh, that's another big issues the fire test lock. You
Yeah.
probably should be taken out.
That's another show, huh?
That's another show for sure. Yeah.
Oh,
But you know, the Civil War was a tough time for us, you know, and I think the aftermath of the Civil War was also a real tough for everybody. You know, after the Civil War, the solution to the free slaves was to put them in contraband camps. And there were 127 contraband camps throughout the South. A free slave couldn't go into the northern states,
could not?
could not.
Oh.
That didn't change till Henry Ford came in, and he needed the labor,
Yeah.
inexpensive labor to go up north to build forts.
Hmm.
And that's when it changed.
Really?
And so contraband, the biggest one was at Jeanneret. It was almost 3,000 acres.
I didn't know that.
And it became the state prison. They had over 20,000 freed slaves there, half of whom died. There's a mass grave there that's got over 10,000 freed slaves
In Jeanneret.
in Jeanneret.
Wow.
I've never heard that.
These,
neither.
well, you're not going to hear about it either.
No.
And yellow fever and smallpox would go through. They had no medical aid. They were in tents and they fed them, and they were under armed guards. It was a prison.
Yeah.
The big barbed wire fences all the way around, big high, where the army had guns on them. You know, we were under martial law, so it's kind of interesting that Huey Long played cards in New Iberia. And one of the people he played cards with was Paulin Dewey.
Okay.
And Paulin's son was Judge Dewey, who was head of Louisiana Supreme Court.
Okay.
Well, Paulin asked Huey, one of the card games, any way he could buy a few acres of the whole prison. And it became an LSU farm, you know, an ag experimental farm. We still have that labor today. And I think Huey decided, well, is 1,000 acres enough for you? And you think you can sell it? And Huey said, I'm the governor.
Do whatever I want.
And that became a big oil field because it has a big salt dome and giant sulfur deposits.
Yeah.
And Mr. Dewey says that, I dealt with him a lot, of sold him cars. He said that we're gonna leave, the family will keep this going, and we'll only deal with the salt or the sulfur when the oil has run out. And old man Win Hawkins developed that oil field.
Wow.
Win Hawkins, he had he's a kind of a famous guy around Lafayette. He had a big duck hunting camp at Oak Grove, and where bankers and all would go and have quail for breakfast and fabulous hunting, But anyway, part of Lafayette's history. But I think it's important that, that history of Fort Butte La Rose is preserved. And I think, it'd be good for us to get back in touch with the guys from New Hampshire and put a monument that reflects what this history is,
Yeah, I agree.
around the boat landing where everybody can see it.
I think you had mentioned some kind of grant or something as well the other day, and I don't remember what you called it.
Well, what they talked about was they would like to identify the grave sites.
Yeah,
And that we'd need a grant to do underground radar
yeah,
to find them. My gut feeling, they were mass graves, they weren't individual graves.
right.
There was 2 or 3 died a day, and they were there for 2 months, and probably over 100 died there.
Oh, at least.
Yeah. Now, there was supposedly some Confederate deaths, supposedly there were 9
Okay,
in the military cemetery.
all right.
And I don't know if that number comes to mind. I kind of read it. Now, this was back that's probably 15 years ago that we found this thing.
Wow.
What did you find?
that we found the fort, you know. And we found it because it's kind of interesting that the General Taylor Engineering Designs had a long latitude. And I'd come back from the state land office and they'd give me that packet. And I was in my office, must have been about, it was in February or March. It was about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I looked at a long line. Damn, I got a boat actually hooked up to one of my cars. I'm gonna go see if I can find
Oh,
it.
yeah.
And I believe I called you, David, didn't I? I called you about going to look for it, you know?
Yeah, I showed it to you on the map that night.
Yep. And went to put the long line in my GPS unit and went up to the bank and walked right into it. Went right over that where that gun emplacement was.
Yeah.
And the newspaper did an article on it. I probably, if I could find it, I have all the newspaper articles.
Somebody's
We
calling.
have some. You on air? Can we help you?
Yeah, there's a town above the state line, above Angola, west of Woodville on the river called Fort Adams, near Oxbow Lake, named Lake Mary in Mississippi. Does that play any part in this Civil War history you all been discussing?
That fort is on Jeremiah Supple's property.
Yeah.
He bought a bunch of that property, a guy from Lafayette. And I don't know if it was prominent during the Civil War. My understanding, the fort was built before that, well before the Civil War.
1799.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I don't think it was dominant in the Civil War or even occupied. It was built long before, you know, when was it?
1799, David said.
1799. It was probably had to do with the Spanish controlled all of that and the river. Well, Spanish did. They sold it. The Spaniards gave it to Napoleon, and Napoleon only kept it 30 days. So it was under Spanish rule at that time.
Wow, thanks.
Fort Adams, yes. Thank you for the call. Appreciate it. Yeah, I don't think it was involved in the Civil War at all.
I hadn't heard the name. I don't know much about Fort Adams.
It was right above Angola, but right, maybe a half a mile from the Mississippi-Louisiana line on those high bluffs on the river.
So you saying you had an set of engineering drawings of the fort from Richard Taylor?
Yes,
Okay.
that's what I got from the state land office.
Okay.
And that's what had a long line on it. And I was
He had his own.
I was kind of, you know, I can turn on his phone and get along through the latitude, but I guarantee you, in 1862, you couldn't do that.
No.
No.
But a lot of these guys were Navy, and so they were well-trained, well-educated, and, you know, but to get that in those days, it's really not easy. Really knew, and you had to had to have somebody who really knew what they were doing. But I would imagine a lot of these officers were West Point trained or Annapolis trained.
Yeah.
I mean, they were from the South, and they were, you know, a lot of the generals and admirals in the war knew each other. They were in school together.
Yeah. And look, I mean, the land now is so overgrown, and I mean, it's thick. It's thick out there.
Oh, I know it is.
You know. So you'd almost need a lat long.
And there's a section 16 right in there that the school board sold the trees on it for $100,000, and we blocked it because it was a critical habitat for the black bear.
Yeah.
Threatened a lawsuit, and we saved all those trees.
We actually have a couple of those creeping around right now, man. They have collars on from Mississippi, believe it or not.
What?
Black bears. They've been living in the kind of the backside of Butte La Rose for about 2 years now.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, they've been collared. The females are the ones that are collared. It's only females that are collared. and
Yeah.
they keep track of them, and, a lot of experiments were done, where they took black bear from 5 western states, and they monitored them through, I think, 3 birth cycles, and it was Montana, Wyoming, Idaho, I think, anyway, 5 western states, and then they monitored birth cycles of bear at Weeks Island and at, I think, Côte Blanche. And the average birth of bear in the western states was 0.9 per birth cycle, and a birth cycle is every 2 years. And there was 3 bear in Louisiana.
Yeah. I think we're gonna have a bear season this year up in North Louisiana.
Oh, yeah, that's a bad idea, anyway.
22nd.
So anyway,
You can't see but the. you
Mr.
can't see
Nicko
her
and
yet.
Blake, thank you all so much for being here.
Thanks for
Stay
having
in
me.
touch if I can help you all in any way with
We learned so
keeping
much
that,
from you,
keeping
Mr.
that
Harold.
history going.
You're a
Sir, I
treasure,
think it's
Mr. Harold,
important,
and
yeah.
I'm so glad to be
Well, I
here with
think,
you.
Blake, you want to do a book on it, huh?
I'm trying.
You should do a book, like.
Right.
I've amassed enough information to write a book. It's the actual put